All right. So this is the APCSP scoring guideline sheet. This is listed as the 2023 scoring guidelines, but this is what is presented on the College Board website. Okay. With that, if you scroll down, we introduced the create task on Monday, but with that, it goes through and shows you where the points come from, how they grade it. Okay, so the first one, it says 6 points. General scoring notes. Responses should be evaluated solely on the rationale provided. Responses must demonstrate all criteria, including those with bulleted lists in each row to earn the point for that row. So this is pretty much like the rubric. Terms and phrases defined in the terminology list are italicized when they appear in the scoring criteria. Okay, so on the left, it has a reporting category. So someone that's grading your create task is going to have this out. They're going to look at it. The first thing they're going to decide what they're going to score is the program purpose and function. It says you'll get either 0 points or 1 point. The video demonstrates the running program, including input, program functionality, output. And the written response describes the overall purpose of the program, describes what functionality of the program is demonstrated in the video, and describes the input and output of the program demonstrated in the video. Right? So all of that is worth 1 point. This is like telling the grader what to do. As I mentioned, some people who are grading the AP exam don't necessarily know everything. And that's why I want it to be as simple as to the point as possible. It's graded based off of this rubric. It says, consider only the video and written response 3A when scoring this point. Do not award a point if the following is true. So some things to take note on. Remember, your quiz will be coming from this stuff. The video does not show a demonstration of the program running. Screenshots or storyboard are not acceptable and would not be credited. So, if the video just shows a static screen and nothing's moving, so don't award a point. The described purpose is actually the functionality of the program. Like, what's the reason why? Like, a purpose behind something. If I ask you, why'd you bring a water bottle to school? And you tell me the function of what it's doing rather than its actual purpose, right? And be like, oh, well, water can go in it. Like, no, so the purpose of it is so that I can take a drink when I need to drink water. That's the purpose. So the purpose must address the problem being solved or creative interest being pursued throughout the program. So give me the why. Whenever you hear purpose, it's like, well, why are you in this class? What is your purpose? Could be, well, because I want to learn something specific. Give me your exact purpose. Row 2 is data abstraction. It says the written response, including 2 program code segments. One shows how data has been stored in the list. One that shows the data is in the same list being used as part of fulfilling the program's purpose. Identifies the name of the variable representing the list being used in this response and describes what the data contained in the list is representing in the program. Okay. Do not award a point if the list is a 1-element list. A 1-element list means that there's only one item inside the list. There should be multiple items inside the list. If I make a grocery list and I just put milk on it, right? That's not what it wants. It wants multiple items inside that list. So, if you have a English to Spanish translator and you have multiple words that are being translated, that works. But if it's just one word that's in that list, then that would be called a 1-element list. Remember, an item is the same thing as an element. So an item in the list is the same thing as an element in a list. Also, if the list has no purpose of being there, it doesn't fulfill the program's purpose, then you won't get a point. Okay. The third thing is managing the program's complexity. It says includes a program code segment that shows a list being used to manage complexity in the program, meaning that, you could create several variables, but why do that when you can create a list? And that's what it wants to see. Explain how the named selected list manages complexity in the program code by explaining why the program code could not be written or how it would be written differently without using this list. So tell me, okay, here's how you would do it with variables, but what if they were elements in the list? Why would that be useful? Do not award a point if any of the following is true. It says the code segments containing the lists are not separately included in the written response section. Okay. The written responses does not name the selected list. The use of the list is irrelevant or not used in the program. If you make a list and don't use it. The explanation does not apply to the selected list. If you give an explanation and it just doesn't make sense. It doesn't explain how the list manages complexity. Maybe your response is implausible, inaccurate, or inconsistent with the program results. Don't be vague. Be specific. Be right to the point. The solution without the list is implausible. The solution, that is. The use of the list does not result in a program that is easier to develop, meaning alternatives presented are equally complex or potentially easier. And the last one, it says the use of the list does not result in a program that is easier to maintain, meaning the future changes to the size of the list would cause significant modifications to the code. Okay, so we're 3 rows in. We also have row 4, row 5, row 6. So we're halfway there. Okay, next way, it says the written response includes 2 program code segments. One showing a student developed procedure with at least one parameter that's been looking to pass in that has an effect on the functionality of the procedure. I wrote a program on the board in my period 7 class. I believe it was period 7. I wrote it on the board and it maybe took 2 minutes, and that would satisfy the create task in terms of the code that it included in there. Okay, it doesn't have to be something super long, just something to the point that shows that you understand what a list is, you understand what a conditional is, you understand what a loop is, you understand what a procedure is. You know that if you pass arguments in, you can then process different items that you've passed in there, different data types, and then return something with that procedure. So when you create a procedure in Python, they're called functions. Okay, we wrote functions all year. You're going to want to pass something into that function. So you write it as a parameter, and then when that method or the procedure is actually called, then you're able to pass in an argument to it. One showing that the student developed procedure is being called. It also says it describes what the identified procedure does and how it contributes to the overall functionality of the program. Consider only written response 3C when scoring this point, but it says you will not be rewarded a point if the code segment consisting of the procedure is not included in the written responses section. That the procedure is a built-in or existing procedure or language structure. This is more common in Scratch. So don't worry about that. Such as an event handler or main method. This really wouldn't apply as much to what we've learned in Python, but if you're using something that is already available in Scratch, they don't want that. They want you to develop your own procedure. The written responses describes what the procedure does independently without relating it to the overall function of the program. right? So speak specifically and speak in this case to the purpose and functionality of it. Row 5, algorithm implementation. Making sure the written response shows sequencing, selection, and iteration. And explains in detailed steps, keyword detailed, how the identified algorithm works in enough detail that someone could recreate it. So, if someone's writing your code for you and you're not able to explain it, or you're looking online for something and you just are using that and not able to explain it, then they recognize it and they're like, we're not even going to give you a point for it. So you have to be able to explain what you're doing. It says the algorithm being developed can utilize existing language functionality or library calls. An algorithm contains selection and iteration, also contains sequencing. The algorithm containing sequencing, selection, and iteration that is not contained in a procedure can earn this point. Now, once again, we're looking at loops going through the program with sequencing and then selection being like if else. Use the first code segment as well as any included code for procedures called within the first code segment. You would get a point for that. It says what you wouldn't get a point for is the response only describes what the selected algorithm does without explaining how it does it, right? Don't just tell me what it does. Give me the full explanation, explaining the how, the why. We want to dig deep into that. The description of the algorithm does not match the included program code. So you might describe the algorithm and it just not be what you're actually doing. The code segment consisting of the selected algorithm is not included in the written response. The algorithm is not explicitly identified. You're too general. Be very explicit and direct. The use of either the selection or iteration is trivial and does not affect the outcome of the program. You just add a loop in there just because, sometimes students will finish their code and be like, what do you think? You didn't use a loop. I'm like, oh. You just go and add a random loop that really does nothing on the side. It needs to significantly impact your program. Last one, row 6. Okay, it says the written response describes 2 calls to the selected procedure identified in the written response, which means you would write one procedure, okay? Then from there, being able to call it twice, meaning you would use the function that you created in Python and then being able, once you created it, using it twice, 2 or more times. Each call must pass different arguments that cause a different segment of the code and the algorithm to execute. So for example, the example that we went through was when you're actually recording the video, show it working in 2 different ways. Show it working when you've clicked on one button, and then show what happens when you click on a separate button. Okay. Show me how you're using the same procedure, but in different ways. Describe the conditions being tested by each call of the procedure and identify the result of each call. You are not rewarded a point if you don't identify the procedure that's given. If the written response for 3D does not apply to the procedure, you just write a response and it doesn't apply. Please pick your head up. The 2 calls cause the same exact sequence of code in the algorithm to execute, even if the result is different. The 2 calls are to 2 different procedures. We want 2 calls to 1 procedure to show that when you enter different arguments in, it does different things. And then you hit the if on one and the else on the other. The response describes conditions being tested that are implausible, inaccurate, or inconsistent with the program. And the last one, the identified results of either call are implausible, inaccurate, or inconsistent with the program. Down here, it shows you some terminology, right? If you don't know what an algorithm is, we've talked about algorithms in this class. We talked about parameters. We talked about procedures. But just in case, this is what those things mean. What's input? What's output? What does purpose mean? They've tried to break this down and make it as simple as possible so that way it's not verbose. Okay. And those are the scoring guidelines for the AP Computer Science Principles Create Performance task.